While holly, ivy and mistletoe might be the most obvious Yuletide plants, there is one more that bears a festive name, the Christmas rose. Only it's not a rose at all, it's a hellebore. A black hellebore to be precise. Black hellebore is actually named for the colour of its roots, not its petals, and Wikipedia also notes that Hellebores orientalis is likely to be the black hellebore described in Greek myths. It just goes to show that you have to be careful when you're looking at these old tales of plants. And just to confuse you even further, hellebores are actually part of the buttercup family. Glad we've got all that cleared up. So let's dig into the magical, medieval and malicious uses of hellebore, aka the Christmas rose, in this week's episode of Fabulous Folklore. Hello there and welcome to Fabulous Folklore, the podcast for all things folklore, occult and just a bit weird. I'm your host, Icy Sedgwick, blogger, fantasy author and your guide into these rather mysterious realms. I've got some rare things to show you, so come on in, take a look around, but be careful not to touch anything. These things sometimes bite. Well, hello there, and welcome back to Fabulous Folklore with me, your host, Icy Sedgwick. We are into our final main episode of the podcast, although there are 2 more episodes still to come in 2022, but this is going to be the final episode of the Christmas-related plants theme that we've been doing. Now, like I said in the introduction, this week we are looking at the hellebore, also known as the Christmas rose. And I know these have basically got nothing to do with Christmas, although as we will discover later on, they do have some tenuous links. But I do thought it was interesting to have a look at a plant which bears a Christmassy name, but really falls under the poisonous plant umbrella instead. And we all know how much I love poisonous plants here on Fabulous Folklore. So we're going to start off with the use of hellebores for healing. And ancient physicians used hellebore to cure gout and paralysis, although the toxicity of the plant means that it can cause, among others, vertigo, tinnitus, extreme thirst and swelling of the throat and tongue. They're the mild symptoms. In extreme cases, it can bring on heart attacks and death. So, not really a plant that you want to be messing about with. Now, according to Margaret Baker, black hellebore could cure insanity, melancholy and other mental health issues, and this was a fact apparently noticed by a Greek shepherd named Melampus, and he saw the effects that it had upon his goats, and when the daughters of King Proetus of Argos suffered from, and I quote, mental afflictions, Melampus bade them drink milk from his goats, and this apparently cured the issue. Now, this is a little bit of an unusual story because Kobe Michael Ward actually notes that Melampus was a physician, not a shepherd, and he cured King Proetus's daughters of their madness, which had actually been induced by Maenads, and it's worth noting that the Maenads were followers of Dionysus, so what one person might perceive as madness could also be seen as divine ecstasy. And that said, another version of the tale is that Hera drove them mad after they insulted her, and in yet another version, Proetus cured his daughters himself after praying to Artemis. So, with all these different versions kicking around, you have to wonder exactly how intrinsic hellebore actually is to any of the myths. Now, Fez Inkwright points out that no one really knows where this particular story came from, so there's no way to check its veracity that Proetus actually did use hellebores, or indeed hellebore-tainted milk, to cure his daughters of insanity. But herbalists in the 16th and 17th centuries repeated it as fact, continually writing of the use of hellebore to cure insanity. Medieval doctors might actually burn the powdered leaves and roots to calm people during moments of frenzy, and this could help to explain its association with tranquility or the removal of anxiety. And indeed, I did come across one awful remedy where people used to actually snort powdered hellebore to try and cure headaches. I can't say enough, do not do that, that is a really bad idea. But S. Teresa Dietz also notes that some people think that physicians used black hellebore to treat Alexander the Great. Problem was, the treatment killed him. And that said, other writers say that it was actually the false hellebore that holds that dubious honour of killing Alexander the Great, while Leo J. Shep, Robin J. Slaughter, J. Alistair Vale and Pat Wheatley did some digging through ancient literature, and they concluded in a toxicology journal that white hellebore was more likely to blame as the killer of Alexander the Great, and that's actually verbatim album, so it's not even an actual hellebore. But hellebores are poisonous. All parts of the hellebore is poisonous, and even smelling the plant can irritate the nasal passages. So it's a little bit of a strange plant to keep seeing pop up as being a healing plant. Now, this really irritating element of the plant could explain why gathering the roots had such a complicated procedure. So those doing the gathering had to draw a circle around the plant with a sword. They had to eat garlic and then pray to Apollo and Asclepius while lifting the plant. Now, prayers to Apollo, the god of healing, and Asclepius, the god of medicine, and there is an episode about him, would appear to support any healing properties of the plant. Although obviously, like we know, while it does appear in homeopathy and so on, its toxicity does mean that it's not really recommended for any kind of use. And I think this next fact should kind of explain why, because it was popularly used in ancient warfare. So in one particularly famous example, troops from Athens placed the town of Cura under siege in 585 BC, and they cut off the town's water supply by blocking access to the canal. Now this actually failed to break the siege, so bundles of hellebore were left to steep in the canal before the blockage was removed. When the tainted water flowed into the town, the defenders made good use of it. Now they actually became so sick from drinking the water that they couldn't hold the walls, and the Athenian troops broke the siege after all, although I think you'll agree with me that that's probably considered cheating. Now the Gauls apparently rubbed hellebore juice onto hunting arrows to make any game more tender. I'm also not sure how we would actually know that, but given the deaths recorded from people drinking water tainted with hellebore root, it's also unlikely. And according to Robert Graves, the Irish Celts rubbed a mixture of hellebore, devil's bit and yewberry onto their blades before battle. But obviously you should always have some degree of caution about such proclamations about the Celts given the lack of written evidence. Now the plant did stop being used in warfare, although it did gain a new lease of life in pest control, and the powdered version could cut down mouse populations in afflicted homes. So yes, there were people using powdered hellebore to kill mice and other people using it as a headache cure. So again, I think that tells you everything. There were also folktales that armies would hire sorcerers to help them on the battlefield, and these sorcerers would actually cloak themselves with clouds of powdered hellebore which would render them invisible. And again, given how much hellebore can irritate both the skin and nose, I'm not even sure how that would work, but that is what the folktales say. Now, I did say at the beginning of the episode that it is called the Christmas rose, and you might be wondering why this plant that so far has been appearing in Greek myths to cure insanity, has been used in warfare to poison people to break sieges, how on earth is it related to Christmas? Well, the short version of the story is it takes its name as the Christmas rose from the fact that it flowers around Christmas, essentially anywhere between sort of December and February. But it does actually have nothing to do with the Rosa family. The Rosa family is actually relatively quite friendly to humans, whereas the hellebore kind of isn't. Now, Kobe Michael Ward actually relates a myth that a girl visited the Christ child, but she had no gift for him, and the Christmas rose apparently grew from her tears because she was quite upset that she couldn't hand over a present. And this helps to explain why the plant is considered holy in Christian plant lore. Other varieties of the story explain that the girl was simply too poor to buy a gift for Jesus. She wanted to see him anyway, and then obviously because she didn't have a present, she cried, and then thus the Christmas rose either grew from the palms of her hands or from her tears. But there is actually an extra story to explain its name as the Christmas rose. Now, according to gardener Simon Eade, a single black hellebore was found growing in an English abbey in the 1500s, and people believe that St. Thomas himself established the abbey. Now, using the Julian calendar, the hellebore bloomed around about January the 6th, which was the original Christmas Day. Now, Christmas Day moved to the 25th of December in the Gregorian calendar, and they tried to introduce the Gregorian calendar in 1588. When the hellebore didn't bloom on the new Christmas Day, they apparently took it as an omen and then didn't adopt the Gregorian calendar until 1751. Now, don't forget, I do have an episode on the folklore of time, including calendars, but it's also highly unlikely that this is true because I really can't see people deciding whether they're going to adopt a new calendar or not based on the flowering of a hellebore. But it is certainly fascinating how much the hellebore does then come to play a role in that particular story. And incidentally, in Dorset, people actually planted the Christmas rose by the front door to welcome Christ into the house. And apparently the plant thrived in such a position. Now, poisonous plants do tend to find various uses, and one of them is often in magic, as you might have gathered from episodes of this podcast. And in magical terms, hellebores are often put under the rulership of Mars and Saturn, and obviously there is an episode about Mars as well. Now, beyond this, the plant is also connected to the star Algol, which represents the head of Medusa in the Perseus constellation. So obviously it's that part in the Medusa myth where Perseus has beheaded her and held up the head to try and defeat the monster Cetus. Now, if you want to learn more about Algol, then I highly recommend that you connect with folk witch and astrologer Amaya Rourke, who does have an entire workshop dedicated to Algol in the works. And what she does know about Algol and indeed hellebores isn't worth knowing. But as I say, I would recommend that you connect with her, and the link is below. And obviously she has also appeared as a guest on Fabulous Folklore. But it is interesting how this really quite feared star in the heavens is then also linked with this magical and malicious plant that appears throughout history as well. Now, both the hellebore and black hellebore enjoyed symbolic meanings including anxiety, peace or scandal, and they were strangely associated with tranquility as well. And you could apparently take a vase of hellebore into a room full of negativity and the plant would actually displace the negativity with tranquility. I feel like that one would be worth trying. But it might also explain why the guide to the plants in Anna Garden's poison garden actually recounts the belief that hellebore is so poisonous that bringing it into your house could actually drive out evil spirits. I would also argue that its link with Algol probably had something to do with that as well. Now, people did believe that hellebore could actually cure illnesses brought on by witchcraft, so it does have this sort of strange kind of link of where it's causing harm on one hand and then healing on the other. And in the 1600s, people actually thought that it could cure people of possession by the devil. And there was also a belief that you could actually graft a hellebore onto another plant, and that would then give the other plant the unpleasant qualities matching the hellebore. And Kobe Michael Ward points out that this could be useful if you wanted to curse portions of the land, especially if you scattered powdered hellebore across the soil. And Ward actually notes that where deadly nightshade was often connected with witches in medieval folklore, hellebore seems to be the equivalent for magicians. And he also notes that it's quite difficult to germinate hellebores, but they do look after themselves once they get established, which might explain why people planted them on graves in Europe. But ultimately, what do we actually make of the Christmas rose with all of these things now under our belts? Well, hellebores are really, really pretty plants, is the bottom line, really. But because they taste so bad, poisonings are actually quite rare because people are more inclined to spit them out because they're really bitter, and you're more likely to end up with some kind of burns on the inside of the mouth or the tongue rather than anything else. I would still avoid trying to use any in your practice unless A, you know what you're doing, or B, you just simply want to enjoy one in your garden. They do like shade, by the way, so if you do have a shady spot where nothing else will grow, hellebores might be an interesting choice. Now, hellebores do create confusion because there are different members of the family, and we do obviously see that confusion, particularly around whether or not the Christmas rose poisoned Alexander the Great. And you do also find that there's versions of the hellebore, like the false hellebore, and you've got white hellebore and things, which aren't always necessarily actually part of the hellebore family. So that also makes things confusing. But ultimately, I think it is quite interesting to follow its trajectory from plant used in ancient warfare and then believed to have these abilities to cure insanity in the ancient era, and then we sort of move through to medieval sorcery, and then you've got this holy link with Christian law at the same time. So I think that hellebores sort of, they seem to fulfill quite a lot of roles for quite a lot of different people in a really interesting way. So I think that the hellebore is a really fascinating plant, and I do think they're also a really pretty plant. So they do kind of mesh lore from different places in a really, really cool way. And if you do want to learn more about the magical uses of poisonous plants, then check out Kobe Michael's The Poison Path Herbal, Baneful Herbs, Medicinal Nightshades and Ritual Entheogens as well. And that's all about sort of the poison path, as it were. So I hope that you enjoyed that episode on the Christmas rose. If you do actually grow Christmas roses, i.e. hellebores, please do let me know if you've got photos of them. Obviously, I'm always more than happy to see your plant-based photos, and you can always tweet me because Twitter at the moment, at the time of recording, is still going, or you can send me them on Instagram as well, and I'm just on both of those as @IcySedgwick. So yeah, that's basically the last main episode of the year. There are still 2 more episodes to come, like I say, so I've got a multi-podcast extravaganza coming out next week for the winter solstice, and then I've also got a final interview based episode which is basically about death omen, so that should be really interesting, which will come out between Christmas and New Year. And also please do remember as well that if you actually go to the podcast.co link for this podcast, and I will actually put that in the show notes below, there is a search box as well, so you can actually search if you want to find anything specific, if you want to sort of catch up on anything. And obviously there are also all the various Christmas episodes that I've done before, including Why Do We Tell Ghost Stories at Christmas. I will leave that there though, because obviously I'm sure you've got like Christmas shopping and stuff that you need to be doing. So I will see you next week, as I say, for the last episode before Christmas, and then there'll be one more before the end of the year. So without any further ado, I hope that you have a marvellous week ahead, and I will see you soon. Cheerio. Well, thanks for listening, and I hope you enjoyed that episode. If you did, feel free to leave a review wherever you listen to podcasts, because that helps other people find the show too. It also takes between 4 and 6 hours to research, write, record and edit these episodes, so if you want to help support my time in doing that, then you can buy me a coffee, or you can join the Fabulous Folklore family on Patreon and enjoy extra benefits, including exclusive episodes and articles and even illustrated talks. All the links you need are below, and thanks in advance.